We're on our way to Pascagoula, Mississippi, home of the 1973 UFO abduction of Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker. We're going to meet several people who also saw that UFO, including myself. This is the Calvin Parker story. Everything you see in this documentary is true. The road to Pascagoula winds through picturesque small towns and communities toward the Gulf Coast. Many of these little communities haven't changed much since 1973. Our first stop is the tiny village of Ellisville, Mississippi, about 100 miles away from the coast. This is where I grew up, and on October 11th, 1973, I saw a UFO. It was just after dusk. I was 12 years old and playing with a football under the streetlight in front of my house. The ball bounced into the yard, and when I retrieved it, I looked to the north and saw a large orange ball of light moving southward and over our house. The object drifted slowly and made the tops of trees behind the house glow orange. It moved toward the south and the Gulf Coast. I was paralyzed with fear and watched it for about 15 minutes as it passed into the distance and over the horizon. This UFO encounter changed my life forever. Little did I know that over 100 miles away in Pascagoula, Mississippi, Calvin Parker and Charlie Hickson were about to have the most horrific experience of their lives. Three robotic creatures emerged from the craft, and with machine efficiency, they took Calvin and Charlie. Both were injected with something that paralyzed and immobilized them. The injections were painful and sedative. The two men were lifted up and carried into the spacecraft. They were examined and scanned. Calvin was abused by a female alien. The men were then removed from the craft and dumped on the riverbank, still paralyzed from the encounter. There, they agreed to never talk about the incident. However, after Charlie reported the encounter to the local sheriff, the news media picked up the story, and their lives would change forever. In 1973, I was 12 years old. I didn't pay attention to the news. So when the incident happened in Pascagoula after my UFO sighting, the only information that I got was from adults who were making jokes about those two guys in Pascagoula that said they got picked up by a flying saucer. And the jokes drifted around for a while. But I was very curious about what happened to Charlie and Calvin because I had seen a UFO that evening myself. And it wasn't until a year later when this book came out, Beyond Earth, Man's Contact with UFOs, by Ralph and Judy Blum. In here was the whole story. And they were there when right after the incident happened, so they took excellent notes and produced a really great book on this subject. Then is when I knew about Calvin Parker and Charlie Hickson. Now, during the aftermath of the incident, Calvin told a little white lie, and he told it for good reason. The media was hounding Charlie and Calvin, and he needed a way to get the media off of them so he could go back to work and start his life and have a life. So he said that he passed out during the encounter with the UFO. Well, he didn't, and he remembered a lot of things that had happened inside the spacecraft. Later on, Bud Hopkins would hypnotize Calvin and bring out even more details of what had happened on board the spacecraft. We're going to get to that in just a little bit. But our next stop is Lucedale, Mississippi, where we will meet another witness who saw the UFO that night. Lucedale is a town north of Pascagoula along Highway 63. It's here we meet Susan Snow. In 1973, Susan was walking her dogs that night near the Pascagoula River. Her story adds to the timeline of events on the evening of October 11th, 1973.
Well, I was outside my backyard. We're probably about 2 miles or so, give or take, from the river where I lived. And I noticed a light. First time I saw it, it was coming from the north, moving toward the south. And it went to a certain point, wasn't moving too terribly fast at that point. It moved back to the north a little, and then a little back to the south, and it stopped. And it was pretty stationary, and it looked pretty much like I would call it a band of different color lights. They appeared to be, from where I was, appeared to be rotating. It was like blue, green, yellow, and red. And they were, I would describe it, looking at it, as I say, as if they were rotating around a flat object or possibly the edge of something. It was pretty bright. It stayed there, it probably hovered there for about, I'm going to guess about 15, 20 minutes that it stayed in the same location. And then without much warning at all, it drifted just a little bit to the south, shot off to the north, and it was gone.
Now, was this before Calvin's sighting or after, or about what time was it?
Well, at the time, it had to be about the same time because, of course, in those days, we didn't have Facebook, Twitter, anything where you could post it, oh, look what I saw, as if you were going to admit to it in that day. So I didn't find out about anything until the next day. It was on the news the next evening, on the local news, and they had mentioned that there had been this encounter that Calvin and Mr. Hickson had reported, that they were out fishing and this craft stopped and they were abducted and all this. I knew nothing about any of this until the next day. But it was, in fact, when they said that it happened the night before, it's like, wow, I was out in my backyard and I saw something like that. And I wondered at the time what it was.
When you would say you were in your backyard, were you looking towards the direction of where they were abducted? Or?
Yes, I was. Yes, I was.
So describe that area.
Yeah, I had taken, we had a couple small dogs, and I'd taken my dog out in the backyard. And I was waiting for her, and she was kind of in that direction in the yard, so I was kind of watching over her. She was real little, and that's why I happened to notice that, yes, I was facing, we were east of this area, and I was facing toward the west.
I'm just curious why you didn't call anyone or tell anyone the next day or the day after that, hey, you had seen the same thing?
Because that night when I got in, my parents had been in the house when I was doing this. I lived at home. And I went in and I said, Mom and Daddy, guess what I was just watching outside? This looked really weird. And they had me describe it to them, and they were like, I don't think I'd tell anybody. So I didn't. In that day and time, if you said you saw a UFO, people would look at you like, what? No, you're not, you've made this up or whatever. So I just chose not to really admit it to anybody. I didn't mention anybody at the time.
Have you ever met Calvin?
No, I haven't. I'd love to. I always wanted to meet Mr. Hickson. Never had the opportunity. I would love to have talked to him about it and told them that I saw it, but I never have.
Do you remember how old you were about that time?
I had to be, it was what, 73? So I had to be, what month was it? I don't remember. It was a long time ago. October. Well, I would have been turning 19 that October. Yeah, you had mentioned it to me on the phone about that you had seen it and what it looked like. Mm-hmm. And I'd talked it over with my daughters after that, and I think it was Jennifer, wondered about if it was a possibility why it looked like an orange glowing ball if you saw it shortly after it came into the atmosphere.
Could very well be. I know that what they saw was blue. What you're describing was multicolored.
Yeah, primarily blue. Primarily blue, but it did have the other colors too.
Yeah. And what I saw was an orange ball, and I just assumed that whatever mode they're in, maybe they shift the color of the
craft.
That
could be too.
If they're just cruising along, it's orange. If they're about to land or do something, it turns more bluish.
You never know.
Or they turn lights on, or something. I don't know. But this thing was so big that I remember thinking, as I'm watching it, that you could put my mom's car in this object at least twice, possibly more.
Wow.
And she drove a Ford Galaxy 500.
Not a small car.
Not a small car, big car. Uh-huh. And I was just riveted by it when I saw it, because I just stood there, and Charlie actually said, or it was Calvin, that said that when it came in, it was like he had stepped on a rattlesnake. He just froze. And I know that exact feeling, because as this one came over the house, I couldn't move. I was just looking at it, just stuck in place.
Well, that's kind of sort of probably why I stayed as long as I did in the backyard. I don't know where my little dog was in all of this. Obviously she was okay. Yeah. I went back in the house afterwards, but I normally didn't stay outside that long. Yeah. But it was the same thing. It just was, you couldn't look away. You just had to stay there and watch it. And I remember that feeling when I heard about it on the news. It's like, and of course everybody was, as I thought they would with me, saying, well, these guys are just a couple of crackpots, they're just out for the fame and fortune type thing. That's why they've made up this weird story and all that. But I remember hearing about it, and it's like, I saw that. They didn't make it up. Uh-huh. I saw that.
Interesting. It is fascinating that we're kind of brought together these years later.
I know. I'm finding that interesting too, that there are more and more people that are coming forward that actually saw what we saw that night. And I think it's probably the same thing as what got me all those years. It's like, we're just going to sweep this under the rug. This never happened. I'm probably the only one that saw it. Anybody else would think I'm crazy. I'm not going to bring it out. And now there are more and more people coming forward that are like, yeah, I saw that too. It's interesting how many people it did affect.
Well, I was 12 years old at the time, and it scared me, but it changed me also.
Yeah, and it's like burned in your memory. You'll never forget it. I still remember standing there and what it looked like, and those goosebumps that you get watching something like that.
Time went on. I grew up. They all grew up, Charlie passed away. Now Calvin's out with his book. And I thought, now's the time to see if we can get all these people together, and let's talk about what we saw that night. And it's been a fascinating journey.
Yeah. I say it's amazing how many of us shared the same experience, and we've all done the same thing I have. It's like, we just won't talk about this.
Right.
I'm the only one that saw it, and anybody's going to think I'm off my rocker if I come out with this. Oh yeah, you just made this up. You were watching a plane, you saw clouds, whatever. And it's like, no, I know what I saw, and it was not of this world. I feel,
And back then, they actively tried to make it was swamp gas, or it was a odd little, something in the air, just some weird aerial phenomenon, but not aliens. But the more that I have seen myself, and then in talking with Calvin and you and others, I'm convinced that it is probably somebody else's spacecraft.
Yeah.
If it's not ours, and it's not the Russians and it's not the Chinese, and it's, in fact, nobody, no human on earth could invent a craft that could do what these things do. Mm-hmm. If we didn't build it, somebody else did. Mm-hmm. And so it's got to be theirs. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for the interview.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. In the book Beyond Earth, Man's Contact with UFOs, there's mention of a crane operator who was on the other side of the river during the abduction of Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson. His name was Lewis Lee, and we're going to talk to him next. Next up, Pascagoula, Mississippi. Pascagoula is a small shipyard and fishing village at the mouth of the Pascagoula River, flowing into the Gulf. Nearby Biloxi, Mississippi attracts tourists with casinos and beaches. There were no casinos in 1973, and Hurricane Katrina has changed the landscape since then. This is where Calvin lives, along with others who also saw the UFO that abducted him and Charlie. One of those who saw the UFO that night is Lewis Lee.
I've seen a strange object I've never seen in my life over the Pascagoula River. It was just sitting up there like it was in a still spot. It wasn't moving, but it had the weirdest lights around it. It was round, kind of egg-shaped, blue and white, silver lights around it. It had a silver glow around it. The middle of the craft looking thing was, to me, looked like it was clear plastic. It had a piece of plastic somewhere, like clear plastic, like you could see through it, even though it was nighttime. Mm-hmm. But I seen that, and I kept saying to myself, Jesus Christ, what is that? So I witnessed probably 5 or 10 minutes while the mechanic was setting his tools up, and it had his lights and things, floodlights, because you're going to be under the crane, around the crane, and really up in the crane. I was just as stooly. You know, you just don't see something like that every day, but I said, you know, can't be a helicopter, can't be a jet or nothing. It's got to be a UFO, but I've never seen nothing like that. It was.
Describe exactly what it looked like.
Have you ever seen a welder at nighttime, welding art at night? They're welding steel at night from a distance. It puts out like blue, white rays, you know, silver rays. Mm-hmm. And that was a little bit like that because it had a lot of rays glowing around it. Mm-hmm. But never seen nothing like that in the sky before. And it wasn't even moving, it was just sitting up there.
From your vantage point, could you see Charlie and Calvin over there, under it or around it?
No. Calvin and Charlie was the other side. That would be the west bank. Well, it was on the east bank, and they would be like diagonally across. There was a bridge there, and they had to go over the bridge to get to where they were going fishing. They wasn't that far away, but they were diagonally across. Like I don't know. Well, I witnessed the UFO that picked them up, you know. But I told the crane operator, I told the crane operator mechanic what I'd seen. He just kind of laughed it off. So, no, yeah, right. Back in them days, 1973, most of us locals, man, we didn't believe in UFOs or Loch Ness Monster or a Bigfoot, nothing like that. So. He laughed it off, and the next day I worked my day job at the shipyard. It had already got out on the news somehow or another, or the local people spreading it around. And I told him I'd seen something, and yeah, right. He put our leg. Come on, Louis. So I said, well, maybe I'll just stay out of it. You know, a lot of people thinking he was hallucinating because maybe he'd hit the bottle a little bit too much or something. And but no, I actually thought of that, but I just kept my mouth shut. stayed out of it. And I told my family, my friends, my deer hunter buddies and all that.
Yeah.
And,
So it wasn't a secret that you kept to yourself. People you knew you had seen
yeah,
it.
my whole
It just
family, my
wasn't in the
friends.
newspapers.
But I know Charlie. Charlie on the job was a good hard worker. But I don't think he would tell a lie like that. I think it really happened, what I know.
Well, I really appreciate you talking to me and telling what you had seen. This helps corroborate Calvin's story. And we all kind of share something in common because we all saw something that night.
Yeah. I really like him. What little bit I seen at the library that day, I wouldn't mind talking to him again. They seem like down to earth, common sense speaking.
For decades, the story of the Pascagoula incident has been told from one man's point of view, Charlie Hickson. He was the one who spoke out about the encounter and did UFO conventions and interviews. Over the years, there have been several books, magazine articles, and material written about the Pascagoula abduction. Some of it is inaccurate, but that is only half the story. It has been decades since the incident happened, and Calvin has stayed out of the limelight. But now, he is ready to tell you his story in his own words.
Well, this is on the east side of the East River, and on the west side where these power poles are, there's three little poles sticking up. That was the pier where we actually got abducted. That was in 1973. I was living in Laurel, Mississippi at the time this all really started to begin. Working in the oil field. I was working 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. I was engaged to get married. So I didn't want to go into a marriage and never see her. So I decided to get another job. So I called an old friend of mine, Charles Hickson, and asked him if he could give me a job, because I knew he was working down here doing something. And he said, yeah, come on up. All right, this was October the 10th when I called him. And he said, come on up and we will give you a job. You can start tomorrow. And what I was going to be doing was a ship fitter there. So we worked all day, slinging a 16-pound sledgehammer, cutting and tacking a ship together, for those of you that don't know what that is. So we was pretty tired. We stopped to eat lunch, and while we was eating lunch, Charlie asked me, he said, let's go fishing this evening, kind of wind down. I thought that was a good idea, going fishing. So we left the shipyard probably 4:30, 5 o'clock, somewhere around there. We picked up that, we drove to the place where we was gonna fish. We first tried a no grain elevator. Then we went to the Shaw Peters shipyard, which was just down the road from the grain elevator. And we pulled up, and the first thing I noticed was all the debris and the trash and the tall weeds. And I thought, hell, this can't be a shipyard in business or anything right now, because it was just cluttered up. I said, Charlie, why don't they take care of this place? He said, well, they've abandoned this place, and the water gets up, and when it goes back out, it leaves all the debris that it washes in from the woods and under people's houses and all. Well, that made a lot of sense. And it was old refrigerators and everything else there where people had been dumping. But we waded down, can't say waded because it was dry land. We walked through the debris, which took us about 15 minutes to get to where we was going to fish. And there was no pier there. And there was no log laying back behind this pier. And I remember us grabbing that log, throwing it up on the pier to have something to sit on. So when we started fishing, I was looking across the river at the old big ship over there. And I was thinking to myself, now how does something made out of steel float? Because steel is heavy, and I just experienced beating on it all day with a sledgehammer, putting it in place. And about that time, coming from behind me, which would be west, right straight behind me, about 300 yards, I noticed there were some blue hazy lights flashing out across the water. I didn't think nothing of it, but I was afraid it was a law there to run us off. So I stood up and turned around, and about that time Charlie stood up, and the blue hazy lights was pretty bright by then, and we really couldn't make out what it was, but me was thinking it was the law. Then all of a sudden, there was a bright light, and it's just hard to describe this light. It was so bright, it was blinding. And matter of fact, it was bright enough that the next day or so I had what they call the blue eye that you get, especially if you weld or something, where it just hurts your eyes and they ache and they water and you have to put drops in them. But getting back, this light was so bright, we could barely make out what was going on. And we seen 3 figures approaching us. But I couldn't make out what they were. Charlie might could have, I've never asked him. But these 3 figures getting closer, and when they got right up on us, then that's when the fear kind of struck in me, because I was able to see that they weren't human. All the time I was thinking it was the law and we would be safe and all. But when these things got right up next to us, they was probably 5.5 foot tall, didn't have a neck. It looked like their head just sat down on their shoulders. They had grayish wrinkled skin, and they had hands that looked like they had mittens on them. I think I described them as claw-like hands, crab-like hands down here. Well, 2 of them reached and got a hold of Charlie, and I remember thinking I need to run, but there was nowhere to run. There was water on the left, water on the right, and water in the front. And it had bad debris all in this water. But I didn't really have time to make a plan. It happened so fast. One of them reached and grabbed me, and immediately when he grabbed me, I heard like a noise. And that was an injection going into my left arm. This is what they figured out later, but it was an injection going into my left arm that just really, and all of a sudden the fear was gone, but my body was paralyzed, everything but my neck and my eyes. I could look with my eyes to the left and the right, and I could roll my head, but other than that, I couldn't have any functions. But the fear was gone then for some reason. This time, this one creature elevated us up about 2 foot off the ground, might have been 1.5 foot, floated us in toward this craft, which is like nothing I've never seen. I was still kind of blinded, so I couldn't really make it out till we come out. And when we got to the door, I remember looking, and that's what the lights was coming out of. And I looked in to see if there was any light fixtures or anything, just trying to figure out what was going on. And it looked like the lights was coming out of the paint. It was just being illuminated out of the paint. Now how that happened, I don't know, but that's what it looked like to me. Well, he kind of paused then, and that's when I got a chance to look. He made a left turn. When he made a left turn, we just kind of breezed up a little bit, and on the right side they had a door that was already open. This robotic looking creature that moved like a robot took me into a room, and there was a examination table there. Now, I think the table could be made out of glass or something. I really don't know what it was made out of, because I didn't have a chance to look at it too good. he laid us on an examination table, and this table was at about a 16-degree angle. And that's when, out of the ceiling, well, he backed up out of the way. Out of the ceiling, there was something the size of a deck of cards that went around, that dropped down about 1.5 feet between my eyes and started rotating around my head and my body and making a clicking noise. So when it was doing this, it got through, and this thing just shot right back up into the ceiling. Now, I don't know if it had wires on it or what it had on it, but it really couldn't have had wires to do what it did, to swing around. But when it went into the ceiling, this other creature, I could turn my head and look, came out from a corner. I don't know if it was another door there or what it was. And it appeared to be a female. But she came out, and I could roll my head and just look at her a little bit. And I noticed she had facial features, unlike this other ugly creature, kind of robotic. This, and I call it a female, and I really don't know if it is that or not. But there was facial features like ears, nose, eyes, mouth, but I never seen her mouth open. Well, she came up, and I did notice one thing. Her fingers, and I called it a her because I feel like it was, but her 2 middle fingers was longer on her hands than what ours would have been. And she grabbed me by the cheek, and she kind of felt my skin and pinched my cheek a little bit. And I didn't have any sensation if it was warm or any feelings from her hands. And then she grabbed, with her other hand, she grabbed me by the jaw and she pushed it down. And that's when she took her hand and run her 2 middle fingers down the back of my throat and that little thing that hangs down, that dangles in the back of your throat there, and tried to go up what I call my sinus cavities, I guess. Well, at this time when this was going on, I was choking. I couldn't breathe, and my nose was starting to bleed. So anyhow, she just kind of pulled her hands out. She said telepathically, I never seen her lips move. Telepathically, she said, well, we're not gonna harm you. And it was actually in a female's voice, and it was in English, which that kind of surprised me, you know, her being able to communicate that way. But her mouth never moved. So that's why I'm saying it was telepathically. But she backed up to the wall then. She made a strange mumbling noise, and it sounded like it was coming all the way from the bottom of her throat, like a goom, goom. And recently I've heard alligators that made almost that same noise, and it would travel. And when she done that, this robotic creature, and I call him a robot because of the way he moved, it was mechanical like. He came back, he grabbed me by the arm, and I felt another injection, and I heard the noise from an injection, and that settled me down some. Well, she just backed up out of the way, and he picked me up off the examination table and carried me back out the craft all the way to the river again. Now, what took us 15 minutes to get there, it didn't take him but just the blink of an eye almost to put us back out on the river. My hands, arms were stretched out facing the river, and I still couldn't move until I heard Charlie. Charlie was laying on the ground by me, right at my feet, and I was standing. And I heard Charlie say, Calvin, you okay, son? And that kind of brought me to, and that's when I turned around and I noticed and kind of seen the back end of this thing going back to the, might as well call it a spaceship, because I believe that's what it was, the UFO. And went in the door. When the door closed, the bright lights quit. And that's when I seen the blue hazy lights again. and this thing just picked up off the ground and shot up into the air and disappeared. It was just like magic. That's how fast it disappeared. Charlie and I was standing there. He said, "You all right?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Let's sit down and talk for a minute. The danger's over with. The danger's over with. The danger's over with. The danger's over with. The danger's over with."
The danger of the abduction was over, but the aftermath of this single event would haunt Calvin and Charlie for the rest of their lives. Charlie wanted to talk about it, perhaps as a way to ease his mind and get it off his chest. But Calvin was so traumatized, he wanted nothing to do with going public.
And Charlie said, "I don't know what happened, son, but did you?" I said, "Nothing happened, Charlie. Nothing happened to me," because I didn't want anybody to know, because back in the 70s, people would think you was crazy. So I really didn't want anybody to know what was going on. And we sat there and talked about it, and we agreed not to tell nobody what had happened. And Charlie says, "Well, guess we need to go." So we stood up. We made our way back to the car, and it took probably 15 minutes to get back to the car wading through this. The car was facing where we was going to sit, so that put the passenger side on the side where the craft had landed just a few yards away. And the windows, and I still have the car to this day, the windows on a 1973 Rambler Hornet on the passenger side was facing the craft, and they was shattered in place. And I remember asking somebody back in, how come they just didn't fall out, which the one on the passenger side door did when he opened it. But they said that was a safety glass. It had plastic in it, and that was in case you had a car wreck or something, that the glass wouldn't cut you to hold it. So Charlie opened the door, and his window did fall out. And the back window stayed in place. And we got in the car, and I started trying to crank the car, and it just wouldn't crank. Now this was a brand new car with just a very few miles on it. It took about 15 minutes to crank it, but I noticed the battery never got weak. And I backed out, and we was going to go back to the apartment where we was both staying, and there was a store on the way to the apartment, and there was a payphone there. So he said, "Pull over, I got to call somebody." Well, I thought he was going to call his wife. I didn't know he was going to call the whole world. Well, he called Keesler Air Force Base, and he told him he wanted to talk to somebody there. Well, I guess he explained to him what had happened. I wasn't paying much attention. By then, my mind was way off somewhere else. And they said, "We don't investigate anything like that anymore." So he must have told them we was been abducted and the UFO had landed. And they did. They said, "We don't handle nothing like that anymore." And it wasn't long. I don't know exactly how long, but I didn't have a watch on, that the sheriff department showed up, and they come to my side of the car, I guess, because I was driving. They asked to see my driver's license. I showed them my driver's license. They never did search a car, but they did look in it. And he said, "Look, you don't appear to be drinking, so why don't you follow us back to the sheriff department, and we want to talk to you about what happened." I said, "Nothing happened. Nothing to talk to me about." So we followed them back to the sheriff department. Well, they separated Charlie and I, and then they interrogated us both. I don't know what they said to him because I wasn't in the room with him, but I'm sure probably the same thing they told me. They put us in a room together, and what I didn't know, they had a tape recorder hid in a drawer in this room, and they was recording everything that we said. Well, I really didn't know what I said then, but they come in and got the tape recorder out, and I didn't see them get it out. They went in there and let the sheriff listen to it, Fred Diamond. And when he got through listening to it, he told us, son, he said, I want to check in with y'all in the morning and see more about what happened. Y'all were upset, y'all go home and get some rest.
In Calvin Parker's book, on page 45, there begins a transcript of a conversation that took place between Calvin and Charlie while they were in Sheriff Diamond's office. Now, the sheriff had placed a cassette recorder in his desk and was secretly recording them. They had no idea that it was there. The idea, of course, was to try to see if they would reveal that they were making up this story or it was some kind of a ruse. And we've taken that recording, condensed it down to a couple of minutes, and cleaned it up a little so that you can hear it. This is a recording that was made immediately after their UFO encounter in Sheriff Diamond's office. Listen to the stress in their voices.
That's something like that is scary. You slowing down to death, you know? Jesus Christ. You hear about something like that, but you can't believe it. Yeah, you hear that. I know, Calvin, I know. There ain't something the United States can have up there. No, it is. No, I'm sure they ain't. This shit, I like had a heart attack and I ain't shit. No, I know. I come one down and you got scared me to death too, son. I'm just laying there crying right now. I can't tell you. I was getting bad about it. Nobody believes. That's what I'm told. I had been through enough of hell on this earth, and now I have to go do something like this. Maybe why they just think that? I don't know. I just tell you, I know you home get to bed and get some nerve pills or something, see the doctor or something. I can't stand it. I'm about to go all the time. I'll take you by the, when they get through this, we'll go by the prayer. I'll get you something. Settle you down so you get some damn sleep. I keep sleeping out like it is. I'm just laying there crazy. But yeah, when he brought you out of that damn thing, and when he brought me out, well, I like to know where the hell you know. God damn, I like to know where the hell got you straightened out, man. When they brought it, I remember my heart, they just froze out just like that. I couldn't move, just like I stepped on a damn walls. No, they didn't do me that way, though. I've never seen one like that before in my life. You can't make people believe that, though. I don't know, so you won't believe it not, because I better wake up and start believing. Damn right, I wake up and start believing. Damn right. Listen, I seen on the police. I can't figure out the damn door. You see how that door will come in on that side of each other? Yeah, I don't know how to open something. I don't know. I didn't see no door swing open. I don't know how to open it. I don't know how to see it on. You see something. And look around, them damn blue lights and them some bitches are just like that, they come out. Yeah, no, you can't believe it. You can't make people believe it. I paralyzed right there. I couldn't believe it. They won't believe it on these days. They won't believe it on these days. Might be too late.
And when we got to the apartments, I was asking Charlie, we had talked about not telling nobody other than who he had just told, the sheriff department and all. And I told Charlie, I said, you know, I'm really concerned about having a virus or radiation on us because I had watched these Apollo missions, and when they came back, they would quarantine the astronauts for 7 days, even from their families, so they couldn't be around them and give them any kind of virus or anything. And the radiation, I was worried about radiation because I knew what it could do. My father worked for the Atomic Energy Commission, and I remember him wearing a badge at all times and them checking it, and the FBI doing background checks on all of us. But anyhow, get on past that. So when I got back, I went to my room, and there was a bathroom. There was a gallon of bleach sitting on the back of the bathtub. So I pulled off all my clothes, my shoes, and everything. I put everything in a paper bag, shoes, clothes, everything. I closed it up. I got in the bathtub, I turned the water scalding hot the best I could get it, and I poured that bleach all over the top of my head and all over my body, and I rubbed it in. I didn't just pour it on me. I sat there and made sure every quarter inch was covered. And I took that bag that I had to the dumpster that was outside. Now that's how concerned I was about infecting anybody with anything. When I went to bed, I was thinking, I was thinking about the night and what we had done.
Charlie and Calvin had had a harrowing experience that evening, being abducted by a UFO. But something they would find out about decades later is that across the river, Maria Blair and her husband were in a car, and she watched the UFO as it was sitting there and as it was abducting them. She saw that UFO that night, but she also saw something else.
It was October the 11th, 1973. I was just 23 years old. Hadn't been long, been married, and had gone to take my husband down to the boat for him to to go out on the boat. We went and sat in the car, and he decided he was just going to take a nap while he was there because he was going to be up all night. Mm-hmm. So I was just sitting there stargazing and looking up at the sky, and I happened to look. I was looking over towards the west bank, and noticed off to the south of Gaucher, there was a blue light appeared in the sky, which I just shook it off as just being a plane, but just nothing to do. I just sit there and watched it coming in our direction. Mm-hmm. And as it got closer to Pascagoula over to, it started coming down like it was gonna land like a plane would. So I thought, well, must be a little landing strip over there I never knew about. So when it started coming down, I noticed that the blue light on it kept getting brighter and brighter. And as it got down close to the ground, it just flickered out real bright. And then I noticed a white light appear on the west side of it. And as it was like a door opened up on this craft. And then I sit there, watched that it was just a few minutes. I noticed it, and then the lights just went out on it, and then the blue light came back up again, real bright, and it was real bright blue, and then I noticed it come back towards where where Calvin and them had been abducted, and my husband told me, he said, "Come on, let's me and you take my clothes on the boat." And I said, "Okay." So anyway, when the aircraft started coming down, that's when we were walking across the pier. And that's when we heard a loud splash in the water, which he turned around and he stopped and he looked at me. He said, "What was that?" And I said, "I don't know, what was it?" And he just started walking on off down towards the boat, and I'm left standing there, and I'm wanting to know what it is. So I stood there watching, and just as soon as we heard the splash is when I looked down and I seen it looked like a human in the water. And so, but just as soon as I couldn't really make it out all that good, so I'm not really sure what it was, but it looked, from what I could see, it had a head but no neck, and it just went on. It just went on away, and it was really loud splash, very loud splash. And I turned him, I said, "I don't know what was." I looked out and I could see the water, the waves coming on the water, and that's when I looked down. As soon as we heard the splash is when I seen it in the water, but it was just there for just a few seconds, and it just took off. It just left. And
can you describe what it looked like?
They had a head, they had arms and legs, but the legs looked like they were together, like they were sewed together, like they didn't move. The arms didn't move, and I seen the back of the head, and it was just real fast that I just got a glimpse of it, and then it just it just went on off in the other direction from the pier. And it had no neck. But it had a head, and it had arms, and it had legs, but the legs, when it was going through the water, it didn't move its arms, its legs, or anything. It just floated. And then it just went on off. And then I didn't see him, because the water was the water's dirty, and it's like, it's hard to make it out. I tried to make it out what it was, but I couldn't make it out that well. But it looked like a person, but it was hard to make it out, and I probably never will understand what it was.
But along with this book coming along, I found out a lot more information that I didn't know. And one was, during the process of writing this book, I called our Skype, Philip, and I told him, I said, I got the privilege of meeting Bud Hopkins one time. Oh, tell me about it. I said, well, he said he was going to hypnotize me. I said, he never did. But, he tried, and I just couldn't be hypnotized. He said, whoa, Bud's dead now. He said, but he always documents everything he says. I said, okay. And it was amazing. Philip transcribed the tape into writing for the manuscript in the book. Well, he just sent me a copy of it. So I just briefly read through the first chapter where Bud was hypnotizing me. And I thought, it started coming back then. I thought, dang, he did hypnotize me. Now, the way that come about, in '93, I took a fishing trip to Cat Island. I told my wife I was going to be gone. I'd be back before dark to fix me a lunch. Well, when I got there, I remember this is close to 11 o'clock, and the tide was supposed to change, and I was going to fish the tide that day. So I got my lunch out, gonna get that out of the way, got me some water, and sat over there on the side, and I laid it down. Well, the next thing I seen, this was 11 o'clock in the morning of that morning. It was 3 o'clock the next morning when I woke up. I didn't know where I was or what time it was, because I still didn't wear a watch or when it was. So I left going home because I figured I just slept a little while and it was dark. My truck had a clock in it, and I noticed it was 3:30 or something in the morning on the next day, and I thought, wow, how do I explain this? But on the other hand, how do I explain the blood that's on my shirt? My shirt was drenched in blood. I had blood on me. There was a note on my truck when I got there. Baby, I'm gonna call the Coast Guard. Where are you? I figured I better load my boat up and get on home. And I pulled up in the yard, and a friend of mine just happened to come over that day. And he said, what's going on? I said, I need to talk to you. I said, I went fishing yesterday. I lost a bunch of time where I didn't know where I was or what I was doing. And I don't know what to do about it. I didn't even remember catching the fish. Or maybe somebody else caught them and put them in the cooler to fool me. He said, missing time. He said, yeah. He said, I know a man that just got through writing a book on missing time. His name's Bud Hopkins. He's at a conference in Tampa, Florida. Now, I didn't know Bud Hopkins from anybody. And so we drove over there, and he drove up to a conference hall. And he said, this is where it is. I said, I'm not going in. I don't want to be around these people involved in these UFOs and abductions and stuff. I don't want them to know who I am. So he went in and he found Bud Hopkins, and he was just about to go on the stage and give a little talk. And he told my friend, he said, well, y'all go to the room and wait on me. And I'll be there when I can get there, just real quick, and I want to talk to him. Tell him not to leave. Please don't leave. So we shook hands. We sat there and talked just a minute. He said, Calvin, let me hypnotize you, and let's find out what's going on. I said, I don't know. I said, Dr. Harder tried to hypnotize me one time before, and I couldn't be hypnotized. He said, let me try at least. So I agreed to let him hypnotize me. Well, I underwent hypnosis, and he was taping the whole thing so he could prove that he was above ground. Well, he taped me, he regressed me back to this time. He regressed me one time to 1973, and he asked me questions about the abduction of 73. Well, I actually pulled information out of that was helpful. One thing, there was a car that was parked there, and I called the tag number out on the car, and during this, I was able to hunt the car down, got a private detective, and actually hunted the car down and see who it was. Well, come to find out, it was two people that was parked out there making out in a car like everybody used to do back in their teenage days. And they was making out, and they seen this, and they cranked the car up. They was actual witnesses, and they hauled butt and got out of there. Well, he recently passed away. She's in a nursing home with Alzheimer's, but she remembered it enough to talk to me, but I had to promise her I wouldn't tell nobody her name, where she was, or anything like that. And I'm not going to do that, because if I tell somebody something, I'm going to keep my word on that. Come to find out, while I was on the island, I went to sleep, and the same, seemed like the same ones that had abducted me, or they looked alike or something, had come back to get me. And I remember this, and the only way I know it's true in hypnosis, as I remember something, I'll tell my wife, and she'll go read it in the book, or look it up, or listen to the disc. So my memory started coming back, which it got a flash from Linda Moulton Howe when she started asking some questions, and I just kind of backed off and didn't want to listen to what was said or done, because I didn't want nobody putting words in my mind that wasn't there. But these things had came back, and when I went on board the ship, I said, I know this bitch. I know her. She's here to kill me this time. And I was saying that on the tape. And I was telling that to Bud Hopkins while I was under hypnosis on there. But we actually got in a physical confrontation. She did the same thing, and I think they had installed a tracker in my nose, and she was going to pull it out. And I finally just got tired of it. You know, you eventually get bullied around enough, you're going to get tired of it, and you're going to fight back. So while this was going on, and she had her fingers down my throat, choking me again, and me bleeding, I yanked her hand out, and I grabbed her by the head, and I started beating it against the wall. She actually started bleeding out her ears and all. She got blood all over my shirt. Me and her was both bloody, because she called her big ugly friend back, her big robotic-looking creature. Now, he could handle me, but my intentions was to grab her around the neck, and I was going to jump out of that craft, or where I was, if I could find a door. And I was taking her with me. I didn't care how high off the ground I was, where I was, if I hit in the water, or I didn't care if it killed me. I was ready to die to prove a point, I guess. And I was tired of being bullied. So I went through all this, and I described what happened, and I described in great detail, even detail that's hard for me to remember right now. There's no doubt in my mind that is true, and there's no doubt in my mind that Bud had me hypnotized, and we actually got the tape, and Philip Mantle transcribed it.
I've acquired the 1993 Bud Hopkins hypnosis regression tape from Philip Mantle, who helped Calvin write his book. I've cleaned it up, condensed it down so that you can hear excerpts from this tape. What you are about to hear is very disturbing.
She's injected something. It must have been 6 inches long.
Where did she inject it?
It was right under my pants.
Could you feel something going in or something coming out?
Oh, yeah, it was going in. And then I felt blood coming out. Blood, it was warm blood. I feel like she changed all my blood out of my veins. I've never felt nothing that hot run through me before in my life.
Did you feel it all the way in your arms and hands and feet?
It was all over.
All over your whole body.
Even the bottom of my fingers felt like they just exploded.
Mm-hmm.
She's leaving now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to move, and I'm starting to feel a little better. It still hurts. Oh, boy, does it hurt bad. It's just like
Does it hurt all through your body or just in that one local place where she injected it?
all over.
Yeah, the whole body hurts.
It's all
Okay.
over. But I see me in a mirror.
Mm-hmm.
But I also see something else in a mirror. I'm not there by myself. But I'm being watched.
Mm-hmm.
I'm being watched. That's what I'm doing.
Do you think one person's watching or two or more? What do you think?
No, it's a bunch.
A bunch is
of
watching.
them.
Mm-hmm.
The electricity's bouncing off the walls again. It's something. Little balls of electricity just bouncing and bouncing.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember dodging them. I'm dodging them now from one side to the other.
When you look in that mirror, do you think you actually can see faces in there?
Oh, yeah, it's faces all in it.
What do they look like?
I don't know, but it's faces in it. It's just faces all in it. And she's coming back in the room.
Mm-hmm.
The door opened, and I can move. She walked in, and I grabbed her. I got her around her skinny ass little neck, and I'm choking her right now. And she's fixing to go with me. And I've beaten her head against this mirror. And there's some kind of black stuff. Yep, it's coming out. And then through the door, it's the same one that brought me in. And I felt the stinging again.
Where's that black stuff coming from? You can see.
She's got ears. It's coming out of her ears.
She got big ears, little ears?
She's got ears like I've got.
Mm-hmm. What color hair she have?
Her hair was bluish green.
Mm-hmm. Was hair loose and curly?
Yeah.
And just take one last look, and I want to ask you one last question about her. Think you've seen her in the past couple of years?
Yeah. I've seen her.
You'll remember more about that, but let's go back to the room now. When you've been hitting that lady, woman, and some black stuff was coming out of her ears, and then this man came in, and he stung your arm, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does he do then?
He leaves and I'm paralyzed.
You're paralyzed. Mm-hmm.
He's back out the door.
Okay.
And I'm paralyzed. And is she pissed?
Is she pissed?
Oh,
Did you hurt her?
she's mad. She's hurt.
Mm-hmm.
She's hurt bad.
Mm-hmm.
And she grabs me around the eyes. Fingernails. And I can't move, and I remember ripping my eyes with her fingernails.
Mm-hmm.
And she's sitting there ripping them down, and all I could think is, I'll get to where I move again.
You were able to close your eyes, protect your eyes,
No, I was sitting there staring at her. I couldn't even blink my eyes.
and she scratches your eyeballs.
Mm-hmm. No, my eyelids, eyebrows. There's blood coming from there. And then a light, a strong light came. And then she could talk to me. But she wasn't moving her mouth, but she was talking to me.
What'd she say to you?
She didn't say nothing now. She's pulling thoughts out of my head, everything that I know.
Mm-hmm.
And she's pulling thoughts out. And she tells me, she says, you're not going to be any danger to us. And I remember sending a signal back. I said, to us. Who is us? She said, you will no longer be a threat. I didn't know I was a threat to start with, but you can bet I will be a threat from now on. She's evil. She's really evil. I can see destruction. I'm able to see things that I've never seen before now.
What are you seeing?
Another light shining on me. And this light that's on me now is scared me. And she's afraid of this light. She's really afraid of this light. She's turning her head now. She's getting back into a corner and trying to get out the door while this light's shining on me. And through this light I can see things that's to come and things that's to pass. I know things that I'll never know again. It's not right to hate the fellow now, but I hate what's going on now. This light shining on me that she's afraid of, and I see the destruction. I see the world being changed for what it's not. I see them possessing bodies and taking them over. And yet I have the power to fight it. I have the power to know who it is. I can see through her now, and the light's gone. I'm at total peace with myself. She's evil. She's really evil.
While in Pascagoula, I had the opportunity to get most of us together who had seen the UFO that night. We were able to construct a complete timeline of the events of that evening, including information from a new witness.
I'm Louis Lee, and I witnessed a thing, 1973, the UFO over Pascagoula River.
I'm Susan Snow. I live outside of Lucedale now. I would have been right at 19. I saw it come in from the north, and I watched it, and it like stopped, excuse me, and went back toward the north.
Mm-hmm.
And then it stopped again, and it stayed in that one position for about, I'm going to guess, about 15 minutes or so, 15, 20 minutes. I was just transfixed. I couldn't take my eyes off of it, because almost immediately I knew it was not a plane. I'd never seen a plane fly like that or be lit like that one was. But I've been fascinated by it all these years.
You're
Judy.
Judy. Tell us what you saw.
Judy Branning, and I was about 27.
Mm-hmm.
I just moved back to Pascagoula and went through a divorce. We were sitting right there. There was a few cars ahead of us at the red light, and we was like right up close to the railroad track. And some lights got my attention. And I kind of leaned in and I kept staring at it and looking. And it was coming from west to east, right straight toward us, above Highway 90 and the railroad tracks. The closer it got, I thought, because Jackson County Airport at the time was not very far from there, and I thought, well, this airplane is fixing to crash. And I got real kind of anxious,
Mm-hmm.
and I warned, and I said something to everybody. I said, guys, look. I said, is that a plane? But no, the lights on it don't look like a plane. And then the best of my memory, I remember one real bright light. I really couldn't make out the outline of it until he got closer, and we were all talking and staring by this time. What is that? What is that? Oh my goodness, you know. And when it got right up on us, you know, I said, hey y'all, that's a UFO. And it got right there so close to us, and then there was no engine, no noise whatsoever. And then it went over the top of the car, and I looked behind me in the back glass, and it went over the car, and then it went straight up. I mean, fast.
Mm-hmm.
And it all happened with, it seems like a long time, but it was really...
About what time was that? Mm-hmm.
And this was about 8:45 or 9 o'clock.
Well, we've actually put a timeline, like I say, and that's been bothering me for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Maria was there about the time of abduction. Of course, I didn't have a watch. Working at a shipyard, when you ship fit and slinging a 16-pound sledgehammer all day, watches ain't gonna work. So I never had a watch. Maria might have had a watch on.
I didn't have a watch.
You didn't have one?
Time was something that night that just didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Time has never existed to me, though. I mean,
Time just,
and then
just
so,
And again, at that time, the majority of people didn't want to admit it.
no.
Mm-hmm.
So
You know?
y'all are the few witnesses that come forward, and I appreciate it. And it's helped establish timelines, but more important than that, it's helped me know that I wasn't crazy as hell
Right.
for seeing all this, you know. there for a long time, I thought probably Charlie was crazy because all he wanted to do was talk about it.
Right.
And, you know, me being with him and knowing this happened and all,
When he lived
I
in
can feel
Dainsley.
better about Charlie now than what I did when he was alive, because me and him had an agreement. We sat here on the riverbank and we said, we're not telling nobody. We're going to get up in the morning, we're going to work. And that's going to be it. And Charlie took it a little different than what I did. He wanted his 5 minutes of fame till the day he died.
Yeah.
And I didn't want nobody to know. I just didn't mention it. You can ask my wife. I didn't talk to her about it. I didn't talk to my family about it. I didn't want nobody to know about it because I wanted my life.
Yeah.
But little did I know, when we got to work the next day at the shipyard, the whole world knew about it. And
Yeah, whole world.
when they called me to come from the come to the office, when they come got me, I remember getting down on my hands and knees in the parking lot throwing up because
Oh, wow.
you know, I was just sick on my stomach.
We've come a long way to take a trip to the past. But perhaps the past is where our future lies. It's been over 46 years since Calvin Parker had his remarkable UFO encounter. And still today, there are those who say that alien abductions don't occur. For those who have had the experience, it's an all too real reality. You may not believe Calvin's story, and that's your prerogative. But for those of us who have had UFO encounters, we don't have to believe. We know.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4,